time to watch, or whether live or the recording. I appreciate it. Welcome to Poliventure. This is a workshop for students enrolled in my political science class, but since it's on Twitch, it kind of broadens the audience a bit. So welcome to those of you who aren't in my class. Hopefully you're finding some utility in this workshop. So a little bit about this workshop, then I'll jump over to week 3 of it. So Poliventure is a workshop series that explores how games relate to concepts in political science. And I'll be live streaming games like Catan Universe, Risk, Civilization, discussing how different elements of the game relate to political science and particular concepts. The workshops are live streamed on Twitch on Wednesdays from 7:30 to 8. And you can go to poliventure.com to watch the live stream, or you can obviously watch it on the Twitch platform. So our workshop schedule for this fall, we started this 2 weeks ago now. So week 1 was introducing the 7 concepts. Last week we discussed communication and direct and indirect forms. Today we'll be discussing information, both complete and incomplete information. And then the following weeks we'll discuss the remaining concepts of strategy, moves, network. We'll take a break for Thanksgiving, just because it's Thanksgiving week and people should be able to take some time off. Probability will be the following week on high and low, and then lastly we'll wrap up with signals, more clear and less clear. And if you're interested, you can watch the recordings from the summer session, which kind of gives an overview of the workshop. And let me stop my timer there. And explores these concepts through both games and then real-world applications. And as I mentioned before, this is live stream on Twitch, so you can check it out when you have a chance. Okay. So just a quick primer. In week 1, we covered the 7 concepts, which I'll do again in a moment. In week 2, we started with our first concept of communication, and we looked at the game of Risk, and I demonstrated how that worked out in the game of Risk. Pretty fascinating, to say the least. This week, we'll be discussing information, so let's go ahead and have at it. So our learning objectives with this workshop are the following. First is to define information. Secondly, it's to explain how information occurs in a game. And then thirdly is to explain how information occurs in a real-life political example. So recall that we have 7 different concepts that we're engaged with. We have communication, information, strategy, moves, network, probability, and signals. And what I'm doing over the course of an 8-week period is to introduce these concepts, to define them, and then to give examples of them both in a game, like today we'll be using the game Battleship, and in real life. And the idea is that these are 7 concepts that are pretty common in political science, and it's helpful to think how these concepts or ideas can exist in we call the theoretical world, and then how they're operationalized in the real world, both in academic sense of how we study political actors and institutions and behaviors, like how does the Congress interact with the presidency, or how does the presidency interact with international institutions, or how do local citizens interact with their local government. But it also applies to fun things like games, which I like to play from time to time, far less often than I used to. Given that I'm married and have a son now. Back in my old days, played games pretty a good while. So today we'll talk about information. So our concept in focus is information, and there's basically 2 types. There's complete and incomplete. So complete information means that you can see the actions of all players. In essence, there's no fog of war. And incomplete information means that you cannot see the actions of all the players. So there's some element of the fog of war. And when we think about operationalize this concept within a game, we'll see that in the game of Battleship that it's obviously more incomplete game than it is a complete information game. So let's go ahead and turn on Battleship here. And I might have to change some settings because I have it. I'll let the music on just a little bit, not too much. I'm going to put this in windowed mode so I can drag it over. See if it lets me go across. Okay, it looks like we got it set up. So this is the interface for the game Battleship. I'm pretty sure I have the physical real life version somewhere in a box in my garage. I remember playing this when I was young, and I was always fascinated with it because it had different sized boats and subs. Now with my son, who's 4, we've been watching, we've seen the movie Greyhound with Tom Hanks, and I think we've watched it, I don't know, 10 million times or something, some real high number. And he just loves it. It just like, he loves, and he doesn't call it Greyhound, he calls it Boats and Subs. So I told him, I said, one day when you get older, I'm going to show you how to play this game called Battleship, because it's like Boats and Subs. And so he's really excited by the prospect. If he overheard me, he'd probably run into the room wanting to see what this was all about. So we're going to go ahead and try to play this online, see how this all works. So it says you can play classic mode. I'm going to go in with classic mode just because this commander one sounds pretty sophisticated. I'm certainly not there yet, having turning this on for the first time. So it's going to go ahead and, I guess, auto match me with some other player who's looking to play online. So we'll see how this goes. Okay. Looks like I'm going against Polite Meerkat 34. And it looks like he's ready. I'm going to go ahead and stick with, I think, this person here. Up next. It says, before each battle, you can change the position of your ships. Click and hold to drag a ship, or click on a ship to rotate it. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm setting up my half of the board. I'm assuming the other player, Polite Meerkat, is also setting up their part of the board. And right away, you can tell that this game is a game of incomplete information, because while I can see what I'm doing, I can't see what my opponent is doing, and vice versa. So I'm just going to go ahead and move some of this stuff around. Hide my boat in this corner here. And we'll just go, let's have at it. Coin flip. Looks like I get to go first. It says the goal of the game is to find and sink the enemy ship before they find and sink yours. Pretty straightforward. You get one shot every turn. Click on a cell to fire. Okay, so this is where my fleet is on the left-hand side. And then now I'm looking at my opponent's board, but note that I don't know where his ships are, right? And this is what makes the game Battleship interesting, is that you don't know the position of your opponent's ships, so then you essentially have to guess. And there's a couple ways you can approach this. You can go through like some kind of systematic approach, like say you're going to do all the corners and then you're going to start in the middle and then work your way out. You can just go row by row, or you can just randomly, in a general sense, decide where you're going to go. So I'm going to start with the inside corners approach and see what happens. Okay. All right. And so right now let's see if he hits one of my boats. Not yet. As you can see, we're kind of having at it, and because I told you what my strategy is, you see my pattern that I'm developing. My opponent seems to be randomly approaching it, and now I want to just take a moment here just to highlight what's happened. So he shot at the grid, and he hit a portion of my submarine. And now what happens is the game starts to convert for on his end from an incomplete information game to a complete information game. Now this isn't like it's incomplete one shot and now it's complete the other one. That's not what I'm trying to suggest. What I'm suggesting here is that before you hit any of your opponents in this game, one of their ships, you just kind of are shooting in the dark. So it's 100% incomplete. But once you are able to make one strike, what you're doing is now revealing this information to yourself. And before you know it, you'll have you're trying to reach a complete information game. In this case, you're not going to hit every part of the grid. Eventually, you'll be able to surmise where your opponent's particular ships are, and functionally be able to say what's going on. So here, I using my inside corner strategy, I now had on my fourth corner, I got a hit, and I get a bonus every time I hit. So I have a choice here, right? We know ships are straight, they're not diagonally placed, so I can either go here, 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 or here, 4 slots, and say that's where I think he is, to try to continue hitting this ship. I'm gonna see if I can go just in the center part, see if it lets me do that. So in this case, I could have continued on trying to sink that ship, but in my mind, I'm like, if I already know a ship's there, then I want to keep feeling out where his other ships could be. So I'm just going to keep sticking with my general strategy at the corners and then in the center, and then work my way back out. Okay. So my ship is sunk. I think that was my sub. I'm pretty sad about that. If my son was here, he would be sad. Maybe crying. Probably not, but I don't know. Maybe he'll watch this one day and have that reaction. All right, I'm going to start here on the sides now. And let's see what happens. Sadly, looks like he's sunk my battleship, which is not good for me at all. And I'll go ahead and just go right. And let's see how this works out for me. Missed again. So in this case, he clearly has the upper hand. Two of my ships are down. I've struck, I'm assuming, two of his ships, just given where I've been able to hit. And we'll just see where we go with this. Okay. So I'll play this for a few more minutes here just to see how it ends up. My hope is that my strategy works, but it doesn't look like that's happening. Okay. So his ship's not that way. Got that ship. Got that one. Let's see if there's a battleship set up. So I don't know what that is. Maybe it's because the type of player he is. Looks like Napoleon or something. That looks like a battleship to me just because of the number of spaces it occupies. Okay. Let's go in the I don't want to go in the corners. I want to go in these parts. I like how I'm going against like a wooden battleship, probably a galleon or something, or a frigate. It's like I have metal, but hey, look at it. If you don't know what the ship is, you're just gonna have to shoot missiles, even though it could probably take it down with the. So I got to strike here. I'm gonna keep going with my strategy. Let's see. No. Oh, I just noticed this in the background. Looks like one of those old medieval forts. Like a Presidio or something. Interesting. So as you can see, now that information is slowly revealed, we're trying to sink each other's ships. And we're not being, let's see, who's being more successful. Okay, so I got the second ship. That looks like a frigate. This looks like a galleon that I got, and then this one looks like a frigate, just based on size. Okay, let's see if we can keep going. It doesn't look like I can't communicate. So if we're trying to bring in another concept here of communication, it doesn't look like I have like a, let me, put like an emoji face or something. All right, let's go try the corners now. And so what's nice about this game is that kind of just keep having at it until one of y'all get lucky. My strategy of like trying to systematically decide where to put things, I feel like covers the bases, because then it starts to eliminate options. But because I got the two largest ships, once you get down to the two cube ships and the 3 cube ships, it's just kind of hard to find them. And knowing that if you shoot in the right places, you'll be able to find things out. So in this case, it's on my little boat, which is always, in my mind, the hardest one to find. And he's still having at it. All right, let's see here. Nope. And it looks like he might get the best of me. Yeah, here he goes. Let's go. That's it for me. And so defeated. So overall, good game. He just stacked him. And I missed it. That's tough. Sad defeat for me. Well, can't win them all, friends. That's just how it is. Okay, so hopefully this illustrates for you like what an incomplete or complete information game can look like. And I'm going to go ahead and close it out and then take you to a real life example. So what's a real life example of this concept of information and complete and incomplete in politics? So I'm going to go ahead and open up this article in the news source Politico, which is a DC-based news outlet. And they do a pretty good job of covering the issues of what's going on in Washington, D.C. And this particular article is like hot off the press. It was just updated a few hours ago, Eastern time, so about 2 hours ago. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in immersive reader mode, and I'm going to have it read to us. And what I'd like us to do is just to think about what this means, and then keep in mind like what's incomplete, what's information, what's incomplete or complete. So I'll go ahead and have this read to us.
Liberal frustration imperils quick Dem social spending deal. The problem is not with the president, the problem is with members here who, although they are very few in number, that think they have a right to determine what the rest of the Congress should be doing. And I strongly disagree, Senator Bernie Sanders said. Anna Moneymaker / Getty Images. By Burgess Everett, Heather Cagle and Sarah Ferris. October 27, 2021, 10:25 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Updated, October 27, 2021, 9:51 p.m. Eastern Daylight. Link copied. A flurry of cuts to Democrats' domestic priorities endangered a quick deal on President Joe Biden's agenda on Wednesday after a frenetic 24 hours of negotiating between the president and 2 moderate senators. An axed paid leave program and a proposed elimination of a tax on billionaires, as well as the tenuous state of prescription drug reform and Medicare expansion, slowed down progress between Biden and Senators Kyrsten Sinema, D. Arizona, and Joe Manchin, D.W. Virginia. After meeting with Biden on Wednesday afternoon, Senator Bernie Sanders, IVT, said there's no way a deal is reached before Thursday. The problem is not with the president, the problem is with members here who, although they are very few in number, that think they have a right to determine what the rest of the Congress should be doing. And I strongly disagree, Sanders said. It's not conceivable to me that we're going to have a deal today. President Biden will visit the House Democratic Caucus on Thursday morning, delaying his planned departure for his foreign trip to make his case directly to his party. He will discuss both the party line social spending bill, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure plan with the caucus, a source familiar said. The infrastructure bill has been stalled in the House for more than 2 months. Manchin has repeatedly raised doubts about expanding government programs, like Medicare, and paid leave while boxing in Democrats with an insistence on a $1.5 trillion price tag. The party hopes Manchin can come up to $1.75 trillion to save some programs. He and Sinema met with Biden on Tuesday evening, and with White House officials for 2 hours on Wednesday morning. After those meetings, Manchin indicated it was time for his colleagues to weigh in on where things stand. Everybody is working in such good faith. The president's been wonderful, Manchin said as Progressive Senator Elizabeth Warren, D-Mass, yanked him into an elevator on Wednesday afternoon. There's 50 of us. Several Democrats said a deal was essentially done, pending Biden and Sanders' final sign-off. But the exclusion of paid leave prompted protests from Senators Kirsten Gillibrand, DNY, and Patty Murray, D-Wash, who told reporters she's not going to let 1 or 2 men tell millions of people in this country that they can't have paid leave. Party leaders were hopeful Biden's visit would move forward Democrats' agenda. My hope would be tomorrow, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said of an infrastructure vote. The Speaker and I both believe we need to get this bill done, and that's why we're working so hard to get a framework. The sudden urgency could be crucial to moving the bipartisan infrastructure bill to Biden's desk before next week's New Jersey and Virginia gubernatorial elections. Yet it will also require buy-in from skeptical progressives who are seeing their priorities increasingly shrunk or left behind. And time is starting to run short.
And so this article goes on to describe like these dynamics of what's going on. And I think a couple things to take away from it with the frame of thinking about information is that when you're negotiating a piece of legislation, that not everyone's going to know where everyone stands on an issue. You might have read of something in the newspaper, or you might have heard it from another colleague or heard it from a staff member. But know that while we're reading this kind of like crystallized understanding of what's going on, the dynamics back in Washington make it so that not everyone's reading every article all the time, and if they are, they're not able to communicate that to the person they work for, if they're a staff member, or the elected officials themselves might not be reading these articles as they're being published or as they're being updated. And so when you think of DC, it operates in a world of incomplete information. And a couple of things struck me from this first part of the reading. The first one is that the president met with two senators, at the White House in Tuesday, Wednesday days, afternoons, and evenings, and that kind of gives you a sense that like if he's meeting with them and they're negotiating particulars of a piece of legislation, well, what about the other 48 Democratic senators? What about the other 200 plus Democratic members of Congress in the House of Representatives? Like, they're not in the room having these conversations. They just know that a meeting's happening. So right away, you have a space of incomplete information. Now, on the other end of like trying to reach an agreement or reveal where everyone's at, Senator Manchin's quote is saying like, all right, everybody, like, let's see where everyone is and let's get it done. And that is basically calling it, okay, there's a lot of conversations going here and there and back and forth, but we all need to be at the same level of information so that then we can make our final decisions, or at least our next set of decisions about proceeding. So in this space as well, we're trying to move from an incomplete information space to a complete information space. So overall, when you think about politics, just as in games, right, you might be on one playing field. In this case, imagine a whole bunch of senators and representatives on one side of the battleship board trying to decide where things are, and not even maybe having a difficulty agreeing where to start. And on the other side, you have maybe fewer players or fewer senators, fewer representatives saying, okay, this is where have my ships. Now, I think one of the dynamics that I would add to the game of Battleship to illuminate what's happening here in real life politics is essentially that some players might be moving their boats. And obviously in the game of Battleship, you don't get to like decide that I'm going to move my boat after you've set the pieces. And we could argue that what's happening, at least with some senators, as we're seemingly reaching this next stage or this next conclusion of discussion and debate, is that maybe their boats were like set up a particular way, but as the game was played, they're like, I'm going to move my boat over here. I'm going to move my boat over there. And what that does is it makes it difficult for people to decide, like, okay, where people stand, what's going on, what's happening. For the most part, in any kind of political situation, as in any game, there's going to be a whole host of information. And because we can't readily see everything that's going on at the same time, it makes it difficult to get a sense of what's going on. But given that any political process eventually has to work its way through public officials and the media and the public at large, we see that ultimately comes to a complete information cycle. So we'll see how these negotiations end up, and maybe we'll be able to bring that conclusion into next week's conversation. So with that, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen in on this workshop that focuses on information, and hopefully this gives you a sense of maybe how to think about information complete, right, where we see everything all the time, and then incomplete, where it's essentially the fog of war consistently. And in politics, most of the times we're in a fog. We don't know exactly everything that's going on all the time, but that's just kind of the nature of the game. So with that, thanks for taking the time, and have a great evening.